Hi, everybody. Welcome. I just want to go over a couple things before we start, and I'll go pretty fast because most of you were here yesterday. But you have buttons that you can actually use in order to raise your hand, ask questions. Are you going to do any polling, like yes, no, things like that?
Never know until we get started, but it could be that I do.
Okay. All right. If you'll just let me know when that happens, that'll be great. And I would like to introduce y'all, and some of you seem to know her, to Sheryl Nussbaum-Beach. Did I say it right?
Indeed you did.
She is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Powerful Learning Practice, where she works with schools and districts from across the United States, Canada, Australia, Brazil, United Kingdom, Israel, Norway, and China to re-envision their learning cultures and communities through the Connected Learner experience and other e-learning opportunities. We are very fortunate to have her here today, and she's the co-author of the book, The Connected Educator, Learning and Leading in a Digital Age. And some of you actually have that book in front of you as we're about to start this class. I'd like to welcome you, Sheryl, and turn everything over to you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. It's exciting to be here. I have been traveling a lot this last week and had an opportunity to work with lots of educators in Ohio and Indiana, and have just been learning wonderful things. And so it's really a great way to round out my week to be here with you at the Speaks Volumes conference and talk a little bit about some of the ideas in the book. Because we have a more intimate setting with smaller numbers, what I'd like to do is really make this very interactive, very informal, and if you have questions, if you want to go in a different direction, then I'd love for you to be able to do that. And so I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping things to get us started. But the book that I wrote is actually The Connected Educator, Learning and Leading in a Digital Age. And one of the main premises of the book really is this idea of being a learner first and a leader second, or a learner first and a teacher second. So what I would love to happen is for you to take a few minutes inside the chat, if you will, and tell us a little bit about who you are. And then, as Emerson and Thoreau used to do, when they would be together and then they would be apart for a while, when they would come back together, they would say, tell me what's become clearer to you since we last met. So the way I'd like to get started today is with you putting a couple sentences of introduction, and then tell me something you've learned over the last couple days in this conference, or maybe just something that's becoming clearer to you as you take the posture of a learner. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that inside the chat, and I'm going to pull up a resource for you that you'll have for today's slide set, that kind of thing. So in the chat, you're going to tell me who you are, what you do, and then what's become clearer to you. What are you learning? What's the latest, greatest thing you've kind of figured out, either from the Speaks Volumes conference or some other learning activity? Right, I see a lot of you are starting to put your introductions in there. I can see the chat bubbles. If you're new to this environment, you notice in the participants window there's something that looks like a little chat bubble, and that means people that are actually introducing themselves in chat. So thrilled for you guys that are here. I've pulled up a resource for you where you can have a copy of today's slides. There's also a little information about back channel chat, which we're going to be using pretty extensively here. If you're not familiar with back channel, there's two links that can tell you a little bit about it. But back channel is basically where you're going to add real depth and dimension to the conversation. I used to think that when I was speaking to audiences, that whenever they were looking at their computer or they were having sidebar conversations, when I was trying to present, that was rude. And I've since, as I've grown and learned and become a connected learner and a connected educator very firmly have come to believe that it's actually just the opposite. It's rude when I do all the talking. So what I'm hoping will happen is in the back channel chat, you guys will extend my ideas. If I talk about something that resonates with you or that you use all the time, just like somebody, I think it was Peggy just a minute ago, extended an idea where I talked about to be a learner first, and she's talking about leader first. Then I would love for you to do that. If I mention a book or if you know of one, you might want to put the link in there. If you've tried something out and you have a great activity or idea, then I'd love for you to put that in there. The other thing I want to happen is throughout this session, rather than it being a lecture, I would love for you to ask questions or interject. And the way you do that is if you look on the left-hand side of the page, you're going to see a smiley face, a guy with a clock on his face, and then you'll see a hand. Everybody will click on that hand real quick for me. Just click on that hand. There, good. A couple of you got it. So that's good. Keep clicking. You'll know you have it when you have a number by your name. Hey, Charmaine, glad you're here. If you want to click on the hand real quick, Tanya, Jenny, that hand on the top left, you'll see the smiley face underneath your name. Good. What that hand does is it basically says to me, hey, I have a question. You can take your hand back down by re-clicking on the hand, and that's going to take the number away from your name, and it'll actually take the hand back down for you. Excellent. So Peggy, if you want to click on the hand, take your hand back down. Awesome. All right, so you've got the resources now. I'll put the link in there one more time. By this time, you should have introduced yourself and told us something that you've learned lately, something that's been clear to you. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get started. This slide will tell you a little bit about me. I'm Sheryl Nussbaum-Beach, as I was introduced earlier. And because now you have the resource page on the slide set, I want to encourage you to email me anytime. I love to have different kinds of discussions. You can follow me on Twitter. You can Skype me. I'm SN Beach on Skype. I'm SN Beach just about everywhere. And I love to have conversations and deepen my own learning. So if you have something that you want to bounce off me or we can collaborate or connect in some way, then feel free to get in touch because I'd love to talk. All right, so the book, The Connected Educator, I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the ideas in here, and Peggy says she's actually got it open, so Peggy might throw in a quote or two or mention a page number or maybe even ask a question about something that I'm not touching on the book. But the one thing I really like about this book, it's a couple interesting things you might not have known, is that this book never touched paper until the publisher printed it. The book was actually written, Lonnie and I wrote the whole thing in Google Docs. Lonnie Ritter-Hall and I are kind of the poster children for what can happen in connected spaces, because the truth is that Lonnie and I have only ever been in each other's physical presence about 30 minutes, and yet we've built a relationship that's deep enough that we could actually write a book together. So it's a great book. If you want to learn to get connected, you can do it by, at the end of each chapter, there's a Get Connected activity, and you're connecting with people all over the world to globally co-create things. It's pretty cool. I'm really excited about it, and I hope that you'll read it and give me some feedback and let me know what you think. I think that you can tell a lot about someone by the company they keep. And so because the book is really about leveraging networks and communities in order to do it yourself kinds of professional development, I think it's important to talk about the communities where I spend my time and both where I have helped to develop and grow and I find myself vested in. I first became interested in thinking about how learning could happen in online spaces and connected learning quite a while back, where I was using threaded discussion in my school and in my classroom where teachers could sort of stay connected and that kind of thing. And after that, I actually developed what was called an electronic induction project. If you look up here on the screen in the very top left here, so let me get something where I can show you. This part right here, INDAP was actually a 3-year project that I did while I was at the College of William and Mary that we thought was going to be about mentoring. We thought it was going to be about electronic induction, taking novice teachers and putting them with really seasoned educators. And what it turned out to be, as we looked at the research over the 3 years, is that just as many conversations were happening from teacher to teacher, novice teacher to novice teacher, as was happening from teacher leader to teacher leader. And we realized very quickly that it wasn't the hierarchical teacher leader to mentee that we thought it was going to be. It was a community of practice. And that's where I really became alerted to the fact that this do-it-yourself kind of professional development in networks and in communities of practice was something that had some real power. Some of these others are ways that I then have played that kind of learning out. And some of these places you might recognize, you might have a lot to do with. I co-founded Powerful Learning Practice with Will Richardson, and this is where we use online communities and networks to take educators through a year-long, job-embedded professional development experience. So lots of good times here. What kind of communities and networks are you involved in? I would love for you to put that in the chat if you would. So if there are certain online communities that you go to on a regular basis where you learn, or maybe certain networking kinds of tools or spaces, feeds that you subscribe to, I'd love for you to share that with everyone inside the chat, and that way we can kind of find out where the good places are to be able to learn. All right, so that's fine, Tanya. Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate that. That'll be important to know. All right, so the mantra we're going to use for today is going to be this idea that none of us are as good or as strong or as smart as all of us, that we really need each other, that connected learning, being a connected educator, is realizing by taking the posture of a learner first, that what I need is to be able to have this mindset of wonderment, a mindset of learning, and realizing that I can only be as smart as the people that are in the room, and that it's through those kinds of connections that are really going to make a difference in moving forward, especially in a fast-paced era of change such as we live in now. So I'm going to start with two guiding questions that'll sort of contextualize. Thank you for those that are in the putting the information in the chat. So Edmodo looks like it's a great place, Classroom 2.0, live webinars, Mighty Bell, MOOCs, so different spaces. Feel free to put links if you want to turn people onto those spaces. So here are the two guiding questions that we're going to use today. First one is, what are you doing to contextualize, and what are you doing to mobilize what you're learning? Contextualize. So we all have different things that we do at stations in life. Some of us are in formal positions of leadership as a principal, assistant principal, guidance counselor. Some of us are in the classroom. And a lot of times when we're at conferences like this and someone will start to talk about an example, we sort of discount it because we feel like, well, that's not relevant to me. Part of being a connected learner is be able to listen to the message, and then because of the scaffolding, because of the schema you already have in place, being able to take that message and contextualize it to whatever environment you find yourself in. So a lot of what I'll be talking about today won't be grade, department, role specific. It'll be general so that you can take it and think about what would this look like in my space. The other thing that I think is pretty important here is how are you going to mobilize your learning? One of the great things about back channel chat, and I'm encouraging you to share with each other and extend the ideas that we're talking about. Back channel chat needs to be focused on what the speaker's saying in a way that you can enhance it and deepen the learning. And it also aligns very nicely with what the National Council of Teachers of English say is one of the new literacies for the 21st century, which is being able to handle multiple streams of information simultaneously. So mobilizing your learning means how are you going to take what you're learning and then be able to take it back and share it with other people. If you're taking notes on paper, that's a cool thing. There's actually research that shows that the act of elaboration through script will cause for deep retention and easy recall. But the problem when taking handwritten notes is I'm never going to see them. So a great way to mobilize your learning in this conference is to actually use the Twitter hashtag. And so I'm going to put it here. There you go. When you go to, if you're on Twitter, if you're not, maybe you want to think about being on there because a lot of learning takes place in that networker's tool. But if you're on Twitter and you use that particular hashtag today, you can actually mobilize everything you're learning by capturing ideas and putting it out in Twitter. You can also mobilize your learning by putting it in this chat, and then I'll show you how to save the chat at the end. So how are you going to leverage? How are you enabling your teachers or your students to leverage collective intelligence? And that's where we're really going to go. So in the book, Lonnie and I really make the case for, are you ready? You know, are you ready for learning and leading in the 21st century? The problem is a lot of us will read a book like The Connected Educator or some of the other books that are out there that are very provocative and interesting, and we'll say, okay, I got to get ready. I got to get ready and do this 21st century teaching and learning thing. And the truth is the party's already started. You know, the kids, they're already there, they've arrived, they're engaging with each other. And we really need to start rethinking how are we going to redefine our role, how are we going to leverage and contextualize these tools, these technologies, these concepts, or risk becoming irrelevant. And that's why it's great to at a conference like this, because it can help you, especially as we start this new school year, really start to think about those kinds of things. Because the truth is, the world is changing. It's absolutely changing. It's not the same place that we've lived in before. I would love for you in the chat, if you would, take just a second. How has the world changed? If you'll type in one thing for me, what is it you've seen that really says to you, yeah, the world's changing? So in the chat, I'd like for you to go ahead and tell me, how has the world changed since you and I went to school? What's different? You know, what do we do now that we didn't do then? For me, one of the main things that I can tell about how the world's changing is I think about how I get my news or how I get my music. It used to be that I went to the mall and I flipped through first albums and then I flipped through CDs. And now I don't even go to a physical space to get my music. It used to be that I'd get the newspaper thrown at the end of the driveway. But the world has changed quite a bit since that time. So the world is changing. In fact, it's everything 2.0. And we have libraries 2.0. The way we do libraries is very different. You have to go to the library, check out the book, and I'd have to get microfiche, and I'd have to check all the resources. But I didn't like that now. Now when I go to the library, I don't have to go. I can just text it from my phone, and I can reserve things, and I can download things, and I can extend the due dates. The way we run businesses is different. Education is really different. In fact, the way that we fight wars, you know, through GPS and GIS, we can actually tell if there's an enemy around the corner or down the way without ever putting our soldiers in harm's way, all on an app, on a smartphone. Think about 3D printing. You know, do you know that you can take a 3D printer and you can actually pour cells in it, and you can print out a bionic ear that will look just like my ear, but it'll hear better? Just think of what the future holds there when these printers are printing not only paper, but now they're printing 3D objects made out of metal, out of cells. It's an amazing time that we live in. But you can really tell how the world's changing when you think about some of our most conservative organizations. So let's think about religious organizations. Let's think about the Catholic Church, Vatican 2.0. You know, one of the things that's very interesting, I think, is that the Catholic Church, and I'm not Catholic, but I have an opportunity to work with a lot of Catholics. The Catholic Church has really embraced social media. The Vatican uses iPads in the liturgy. They're on Facebook. They're on Twitter. The Pope has his own Twitter account. Facebook uses YouTube. In fact, they've made it such that if you're a connected educator and you are too busy, a connected Catholic educator, and you are too busy to go to confession, then don't worry. There is actually an app for that. And so if you want to be able to use the confession app, you can, and it really does save you time. So I'll put that link in there. It was funny, I was actually working with a group of Catholic educators, and I had a sister come up to me after I'd shared the app, and you know, everybody got a chuckle out of it that the busy Catholic could use that app. And she said, Sheryl, I wanted to talk to you about the app. And immediately I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble. I said, sister, I'm so sorry if I offended you. I was just trying to be lighthearted and kind of funny. And she says, oh no, the app, I use the app. The app's a great thing. And then I just kind of laughed. She said, but I want to, if you ever share it again, you need to tell people they can use the app, but they still have to go to confession. And they just take the app with them. So there truly is an app for everything. Melanie's right. David Wiley talks about 6 trends for the digital age. And you can see some of them here. He talks about this idea of moving from analog to digital. He talks about moving from tethered to mobile. And it's very interesting, this idea of moving tethered to mobile. If I can see you, see in the audience here, what I'd love to know is how many of you have a smartphone that pretty much goes everywhere with you. And you can tell me that if you'll look in the polling tools right underneath your name. You got the smiley face, the guy with the clock on his face, the hand. Right next to that is a check and an X. If you hover over it, you can choose check or X. If you have a mobile device that goes everywhere with you, I would love for you to put a check. If you don't, if you're not into that, if you haven't gotten a cell phone mobile device, then you can put an X. So let's just do a quick survey in the room. Check or X. So do you have a mobile device and maybe you leave for work and you realize you don't have that smartphone or that mobile device with you, you go back home and get it. You have a piece that goes everywhere with you. So a couple of you haven't voted yet. So Becky, I don't know if you'll click on the check or the X. It's up at the top right underneath your name. And I'll give you just another second, and then I'm going to capture the votes that we have here. So go ahead and give you a second to do that. And I'm going to publish them. So you can see that most of us actually do have a device like that. And it's an interesting trend in and of itself. Basically what we're finding is that before, where we were actually tethered to our machines, now we're actually tethered to our mobile devices. In fact, Sheryl talks about this quite extensively in her book, Alone Together. If somebody wants to grab the, and I apologize if you can hear the phone. If somebody wants to grab the link, you can actually embed the link in the back channel chat for me. Just Google Alone Together by Sheryl. But the point she makes in this book, excuse me, is that now we're not tethered to Cat5 cables. We don't have to be in the same room where we're plugged into the wall. We can take these devices and we can learn anywhere, anytime that we want to learn. But now it's really impacting society in that we are actually tethered to the mobile device. And that communication is taking place more in that device than it is face-to-face. And she doesn't place judgment, either good or bad. She just makes note that this is something we probably ought to be talking about. So the world is changing. You know, when we think about it, we've seen a shift. We've seen a shift from the DOS screens. How many smile at me if you actually use that DOS screen? If Peggy, that's a great point. If you actually remember that Charles does, we were cool, weren't we, Charles? You had that green screen and you could type in it, you could write words like list and run, and people would ooh and ah, and they think you were so smart because you knew that vocabulary. And then they actually wrapped that green screen in that graphical user interface, and we did a lot of clicking. But the truth is that electronic file cabinet, if you will, that great device where we could click on Mozart and the kids could hear it instead of just reading a paragraph and seeing a little gray picture, that as cool as it was totally undisrupted. It just sat in the corner, and I would use it when and if I wanted to use it. When Web 2.0 came along, things really started to change. Schools were in uproar. You know, they were filtering everything and locking everything down. They were used to having school websites that were very static in nature and very controllable. And with the Web 2.0, the read-write web, people were talking back and forth, and parents were able to add their 2 cents, and kids were texting in their pockets on their mobile devices and capturing audio and video of meltdowns in the classroom and posting it to YouTube. And, you know, we were absolutely convinced that kids were going to be kidnapped and taken to Siberia, and that that the world was just going, you know, just in a terrible state because of social media. Things have calmed down with that a little bit now. It's not quite as disrupted. It's very common now to see, like on even your favorite news channel, along the ticker tape at the bottom, where it'll say, you know, tweet us, Google us. You'll see in commercials now people are using their smartphones and that they're tweeting, and movie lines, you can tell it's really different. In movies, it'll be embedded where people are going to, you know, they'll instead of call me, you know, give me a call, they say tweet me, or, you know, I'll see online. And so it's becoming more commonplace now that Web 2.0 isn't as disruptive as it was. But got news for you, don't get comfortable. Now we're actually moving into singularity. We're moving into Web 3.0, where avatars can actually do your bidding. And H1N1 got you down, can't get to school because there's an epidemic. You know, we're going to be able to send our 3D representations of ourselves. So there's this real shifting. And it's something that, as learners, as being part of a profession that's the birthplace of every other profession, schools actually birth every single other profession, we've got to start to rethink about how are we going to redefine ourselves? How are we going to meet this kind of shifting culture where learning doesn't start and stop at the schoolhouse door anymore? It's basically anywhere, anytime. It's a collaborative practice. It's networks, not done as individuals, and it's very distributed, lots of multiple entry points. And so that's got to impact the way that we do things. So when we think about the possibilities, we need to start to think about, do we need to be multi-literate? You know, is visual, is text-based and auditory and oral speaking, are those literacies the only literacies? Or are there many other literacies that we need to really be considering? How many of you in the room have been teaching for more than 10 years? I would love for you to put that in the chat and let me know if you've actually been teaching for more than 10 years. So you can do it with a check or an X, more than 10 years, or you can just put it in the chat, either way you want to do it. Right at 10 years, 37, wow. Congratulations, thank you for what you've given the profession. Okay, so for those of us that have been teaching more, wow, great experience in this room. What we find is that there's this changing demographic. I'd love for you to put in chat, are you seeing things shift up? Are you seeing things change in terms of the kinds of kids that you're getting in your classroom? And if you are, I'd love for you to grab the mic and tell me what kinds of kids, what kind of changes are you seeing? Jenny, will you click on the talk button? What's changing? Peggy, what's changing? Either one of you have a mic where you can click on talk for me and kind of share what's changing? All right, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can put it inside the chat. I'm okay with that. You're trying to figure it out. Okay, so Jenny, look in the top left. The top left underneath the audio panel, the video panel, you'll see a talk button. It's right above your name on the top left. And if you click that talk button right now, you'll be able to talk. Jenny's on a tablet device, so she's trying to figure it out. 3 dots in the bottom right, Jenny, will probably bring up that talk button for you. There's probably three dots. I'm going to let you find it. You got it. Yay.
Did I get it?
You so got it. So what do you think? Why?
Okay.
What's been changing about the kids in your classroom?
Oh, I feel like I don't mean to be negative, but I feel like they're coming with less skills, and they need more from me. In a lot of ways, they have great technological skills. Well, they think they do anyway. But, you know, I still get kids that are, you know, sorry, you hear my little ones in the back, that can't even figure out the website. Sorry, guys.
It's all right. You can go ahead and tend to them. So we're seeing, what I hear her saying is that the kids that she's got coming might be tech savvy in terms of social ability, but not so much in using these tools for learning. And sometimes that's a totally different ballgame. Jenny, if you'll click your mic off. That way.
Sure, I apologize.
So, oh, no worries at all. So the changing demographic is in the kids that are coming to us have different skill sets, but they very much still need a teacher. I had a group say to me in the keynotes that I was doing, they said, you know, why are you still talking about this? You know, I'm not going to be part of this revolution because I'm not going to have computers replace teachers. I'm not going to be replaced by a computer. And, you know, what I say to that is that if you can be replaced by a computer, if a teacher can be replaced by a computer, then you probably should be. But the truth is that teachers who understand how to use technology in seamless and important ways to deepen and transform the learning for kids, teachers who know how to use technology to connect and to collaborate are going to replace teachers who don't. And that's absolutely the truth. It's not that a computer is going to replace you. It's that technology now is as important a strategy, as important a pedagogy as a paper and pencil used to be in the classroom. We're in a place now where you really need to think about how can we have active content creators? How can we involve these kids in global collaboration? Because the truth is that a lot of kids that are in your classroom, whether they're itty bitties or they're in middle school, high school, these kids are going to be carrying a virtual lunch pail to work, and they're going to be collaborating with people globally all over the world that have very different cultures than their own. And we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing to prepare them for that? How are we preparing kids for the future that awaits them? Not our future, not our present. You know, when we think about our future, we go, okay, I'm going to begin with the end in mind. You know, when we think about that, the end is often you know, 5, 10, 15 years, and we're thinking, okay, I'm going to do this curriculum and I'm going to do it 15 years out there. When we're talking about these kids, for many of them, it's 25, 50, 75 years out. What are you doing to prepare them for their future and what they're going to be working in? Just like Jimmy said, you know, the truth is the kids, they're already using these tools. They're using them for social ability. They've tasted the honey. They know what it's like. It's kind of interesting. If you talk to teachers who have gotten out on Twitter, in the chat, how many of you use Twitter? If you'll just put yes or no, you don't do the check, but in the chat, maybe you can put your Twitter name in the chat, and that way we can kind of all follow each other. And don't forget, if you are on Twitter, we're actually using this hashtag, so I'm going to put it here. But if you're on Twitter, you can follow me and Peggy. We're putting ours in, and then anybody else who has it can put theirs in. But one of the things, just put your name in, and that way we can all follow each other. One of the things that happens is that on Twitter, a lot of teachers will get on there and they'll say, this is the best professional development I've ever had. And that always creates angst inside of me because I'm thinking, it isn't really the best professional development you've ever had because you don't really change anything. You share links, you have conversations, you're moved, you're motivated, you're stimulated, you're inspired. But it's really more like the emancipation of the teachers from the silos of their classroom. They're finally having professional conversations with other adults. And so I think it's a great way to network, but like Nancy White tells us, it's out of networks that communities fall. So that once you're in places like that and you meet and you get to know each other and you can actually start to connect and remix and collaborate on things that are very important. So because our children are free-range learners, you know, we want to think about, okay, they can learn anything, anytime we want to learn it. What is it that we need to change so there isn't this disconnect when they come to school so that they don't have to power down? I'm curious, how many of you feel like you have to power down when you come to school? How many of you in some ways feel like it isn't business as usual, that at home maybe you're quickly checking things on your phone, checking things online, you're operating in a little bit different way, and when you come to school, you aren't as connected as you are when you're operating in your regular personal life. And a lot of kids feel that way because they are constantly connected to each other, and they learn socially, and they inspire each other, and they might not be learning in the context of standards-driven kinds of curriculum or the kinds of deep learning that we want them to, but they understand that social ability, and all we have to do is be able to leverage that. See, if the pace of change is accelerating, and many feel that it is, if many feel that the pace of change is accelerating to the point that there was more knowledge created in this last year than in the past 5,000 years. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Now, not all knowledge is good knowledge, so there's a lot of stuff being created maybe that isn't valuable. But just to think that there is so much data, so much generated in the past 5,000 years. I actually heard a demographer that was talking that said by the year 2020, knowledge will be doubling every 72 hours. Can you imagine? Knowledge is doubling every 72 hours. So let's be cynics. Let's say nah, because you know there's yuck knowledge. What about porn and stuff like that? There's horrible knowledge. So let's say half of all knowledge. So let's say a fourth. Let's say a 16th. Let's say a 32nd of knowledge is going to be doubling every 72 hours. Let's say a 64th of all knowledge is going to be doubling every 72 hours. I don't care what I dissected it to, it was still intimidating because what it means is that as textbooks are being published, they're becoming outdated before kids even graduate from high school. And that for someone like me, who's a researcher in the ed tech field, that when I do research and it goes through the jury process and it's, do you do the study and then you write it up and it goes through the process, before it can even be published, it's outdated. And so we've got to start thinking about what does this mean and what kind of shifts is it going to bring about. And in the classroom, the shift is really one from an emphasis on teaching to an emphasis on co-learning. That instead of it being me, the knowledge giver, standing up at the front of the room and delivering the content, it really needs to be me, the community member, that is co-constructing, that is doing reverse mentorship, that's helping the students understand now that you can learn anything you want to learn anytime you want to learn it, at least what you bring to the classroom is a valid starting point. So we have this idea of really shifting from classrooms kind of structures to community-based structures. And here's what I mean by that. Think about it. When we go to school, you either line kids up in rows and columns, or if you're really progressive, you put them in tables for spacing each other, right? That cooperative learning style. But yet, even though we have them clustered together, they're each competing against a standard, and we're assigning each a grade as individuals. Kids aren't collaborating as a community of learners. They're working as individuals. Very much the top construct worked very well for that because the teacher is working with each individual. But as we start to shift into the 21st century, we're going to see this idea of not cooperation, but collaboration is becoming very important. And in the book, we talk a lot about, Lonnie and I, about the difference between cooperation and collaboration. And I think it's an important point to make. Cooperation is where we really think about kids cooperating together, and the focus is on the task or what they're doing. So that if one kid's absent and you put another child in that spot, the work's going to continue. But when you talk about true collaboration, we're talking about the giftings, the experience, the talents of the individuals working on the project is so valuable that if you take one out, the work isn't going to continue. And that is kind of a culture shift in the way that we do teaching and learning in the 21st century. So, you know the new blooms. We're creating curriculum, and we want to be operating in the higher order thinking skills. Now, when we're establishing a foundation of knowledge, when you come in at ground zero learning, there has to be some knowledge and some comprehension and some applying. But pretty quick, we want to make sure that we're producing a deep understanding, which means operating at these higher levels. That means that you've got kids that are now producers of information rather than just passively consuming information. The problem, though, is that even if you're operating at the top level of blooms, even if you're up here at Create, that is not going to be enough, because what we really have to think about is this idea of connected learning. This idea of helping kids, you can see these avatars, these 3D representations, having very deep, meaningful conversation. We have to think about how are we going to allow kids to learn through connecting with other people. Now, I was kind of half watching the chat, and I saw where Peggy was talking a little bit about Clay Shirky, and it's pretty important. Clay actually wrote a book. He was very visionary around this, and a while back he wrote a book called Here Comes Everybody. And in that book, he says that there's actually 4 steps to mastering the connected world. There's share, which is, these are developmental. First thing I do is I'm willing to share links. I'm willing to share my blog. I'm willing to share my ideas in a back channel chat like this one. Then there's cooperate, and that's where we decide to attend each other's webinars, and we kind of cooperate on maybe putting a Google Doc together or something, co-presenting at a conference. Then we move to collaborating in online spaces, and that's where we come together and we go, oh, cool, you're doing that? Well, why don't we remix this a little bit, and then you and I can create a new kind of thing based on our own talents, and then it actually ends up in collective action. And collective action usually has to do with service learning. It has to do with activism, really looking at how can we do something important that's going to have lasting impact on a large scale with other people. So what I did is I took Clay's work and I actually turned it into the Connected Learner Scale, so that when we're thinking about how first myself as a connected educator are going to start to leverage networks and communities and bring it into the classroom, I want to kind of run it through the ideas on the scale so that I have kids sharing, so that people can find us, so that we can remix the ideas, actually collaborate on something very meaningful that would end in social justice or activism or service learning. And just imagine the legacy we could leave if even a portion of what we did ended up in the collective action bucket there. I mean, that would be an absolutely amazing thing. Gary Marks wrote a kind of cool article a little while back, and it was 10 trends that were going to affect young children, 10 different things that was going to impact them. And I think this one is an eye-opener. And the reason I think it's an eye-opener is because this puts credibility back in schools. See, if schools are the birthplace of every other profession, and if schools are the place where literacies are born, Abraham Lincoln said that the philosophy of the classroom in one generation was actually the philosophy of the government in the next. And think about it. I mean, think about my day, people weren't environmentally conscious because schools really started an environmental push to the curriculum. Now we're all environmentally conscious. Back in my day, everybody's parents smoked, most, and smoking wasn't thought of to be a big deal. Then schools put that as a part of their curriculum, and now smoking really isn't, and this is not a, please, if you smoke, please do not take this as disrespectful. But now a lot of people don't smoke, and we have smoke-free public areas. So it was the philosophy of the classroom in one generation that really impacted the philosophy in the next. That's why this idea about social and intellectual capital being the new economic values is good news for schools, because that social and intellectual capital, that building the capacity of people intellectually and helping them to think about how they can connect and network has always been what we've done. It's just now we have knowledge management tools that are going to help us do it more effectively. So it's this unleashing and connecting to the collective knowledge, the collective brain, that is a very powerful or passionate kind of thing. So that schools just become one place your students learn. Schools are one place you learn. And there's tons of other learning options. Now, when I first saw this graphic, this cute little drawing here, I was kind of taken aback because I thought, well, that's demeaning. That means that schools aren't as important anymore. And I've since really come to understand that it's not demeaning at all. That what this means is that it gives us a chance to redefine ourselves. Just like businesses will redefine themselves every year, and that we'll all go on January 1st, we have all these New Year's resolutions, that schools, because of this, because of where we are, that will be the new economic values, it positions us in a great place to really think about what are the principal changes that need to take place. First with me as a connected educator, and then as a teacher leader, being able to bring that, or as a person of formal educational leadership, bringing that to the schoolhouse and really thinking about what needs to change. Now, in addition to that, professional development needs to change. It needs to be very different. We can't do the kinds of professional development, me talking at you like I'm doing right now, that we've always done, and expect people to be able to reculture. This isn't the kind of thing that you can workshop, this kind of change. So you've really got to think about how can we produce a thick density of change savviness in our faculty? How can we help them truly become do-it-yourself professional development people? How can they seek out and not wait to be fed? How can they go and connect and collaborate in networks and online communities and then bring what they learn? This is the missing ingredient here. A lot of us are starting to connect and collaborate. But take what you're learning from the Speaks Volumes conference, take what you're learning from what you do on Twitter, take what you're learning in the online spaces where you spend your time, bring it back to the face-to-face context and use it to inform the school improvement goals. There's got to be a so what. And so networking can't be enough. We have to bring it back to our face-to-face learning communities and to our online communities and really start to use it to inform practice. So I want to take a minute, and I want us to kind of think about, we're going to do a collective wondering, if you will, around do-it-yourself learning. In the book, I talk a lot about what does it mean to be a do-it-yourself professional development learner. You know, how do I do it-yourself learning? First of all, I want you to know that the United States Department of Education, I serve on a technical working group as an advisor to them, and what they're working on right now is very much around personal learning, do-it-yourself professional development. In fact, the month of October this year is going to be devoted to connected learning. And Obama's new initiative, the Connect Ed initiative, that actually is going to have connected learning as its professional development arm. So in October, they're going to kind of launch that, use Connected Educator Month as a chance for us all to share do-it-yourself kind of professional development opportunities, not something they do to us, something we all do, and open it up and offer it to other people to be able to participate. So what I'd like to do is a collective wondering around this idea of what is it? When we say do-it-yourself learning, or we say connected learning, what the heck? So my timer's already going, so I'm just going to use that timer. And I'd like for us to take 2 minutes, and inside the chat, I'd like 100% of us here, and so I don't know if Barbara, if you and Donna will be willing to play as well, but what I'd like for us to do is to get in touch with our inner 4-year-old and ask some why questions. What is it that you want to know? What is it that you wonder around do-it-yourself professional development? So the way we're going to do this is I'll type the question, what do you wonder? So what do you wonder about connected learning? And so for about 3 minutes, I want you to start statements that begin with, I wonder, and then just allow yourself to wonder. Don't be evaluative. Don't worry about what you think people are going to think. Just let the questions bubble up. So I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to reflect with you, and let's just do a collective wondering. And if you want to pop that chat out, you can. There's some little lines there to the left, and if you do a pull down on those, it'll say detach panel, and you can actually move that chat window wherever you want it to go. So that way if it starts going by fast, you can still read. What is it you wonder? What do you wonder about connected learning? What do you wonder about do-it-yourself professional learning? What do you wonder about connected education? So I'm going to be quiet. It's 9:15 on the timer, and I'm going to go to about 7:15, maybe a little less, and we'll do a wondering. Go ahead. What I'd love for you to do now is change from I wonder to what do you know? What is it that you know about connected learning? What is it that you've already figured out about leveraging networks and communities to be able to learn as an adult, and as leveraging communities and networks and online tools as a way to learn for children? What do you already know? So these statements you're going to begin with I know. If you haven't figured out what we're doing, we're actually in the chat right now, and you're typing sentences that you're going to begin with I know. What is it you know about this style of learning? And see, this is the thing. So many of you know so much. And it's through the transparent sharing of those who know that they're teaching us, and it's the word that we are, if you take the posture of a learner, when you transparently share what you're learning or what you know, then you are actually teaching. And those of us who have taken the posture of the learner along with you are co-learning with you because you're teaching us as you're transparently sharing. So just another couple seconds, what do you know? All right, wonderful. I love what you're putting in there, and I'm so appreciative of it. Keep it going. I wanted to take a minute, because sometimes it really helps when you're thinking about connected education to see it in practice. So I'm going to run through an infographic that I've split up into some slides. And what I want you to think about as I share these with you is this realistic? Is Susan, from your perspective, and we're going to end with just kind of a conversation and some questions after this, is Susan's life, is the day in the life of Susan, a connected educator, realistic to your context? Is this what it looks like? Is this the new gold standard? Or am I kind of over the top here? So let's just look for a minute at Susan's day. So here she is. Susan is, the sun's rising, she's getting up just like you do, probably rushing the kids around, drinking coffee, whatever she does. She's an elementary school teacher, and she gets on Twitter very quickly, maybe via her phone, through an app, or on her computer, to check in with Robert, who's also a fourth grade teacher, but he lives in Australia. Now, they've never met, but their classrooms right now are collaborating on something. They're not collaborating on Twitter. Excuse me, they're actually collaborating their two classrooms, but they're checking in with each other via Twitter. And they're just comparing notes saying, hey, what did you think about what we're doing? Are we ready to go to the next phase? Then, when Susan's online, this is before she gets to school, she sees a link from someone in her personal learning network on Twitter about this educational policy debate that's going on. And she is a teacher leader in her own right. So she reads the article and she decides, you know, this is important, and she retweets it to all of her followers, and then she actually bookmarks it on Digo, her social bookmarking site, and she sees that other people are reading that too, and they're commenting, and they're leaving some anecdotal kinds of evidence around that article. Then she quickly jumps on Google Reader, and she does this quick scan. So Google Reader's pulling through RSS all the materials together, and she looks to see if any of the kids updated their blogs, is there anything that she's following, about have they made changes to the wiki, and she looks for comments and revisions to the unit that she and a couple colleagues are co-designing. So her reader, Google Reader is no longer part of the learning landscape, but the reader that she's using is pulling it all together, where she's taking a quick look and seeing what's going on. Now, school's starting. She's arrived. She's at school, and her class is studying Iceland's geology. They're very deep into the unit, and a member of Susan's personal learning network actually lives in Iceland. And so what they've done is, because she shared that she was studying this, they connected, that connected learner scale, and they've decided that what they're going to do is sort of remix what they both normally do around this topic in their classrooms, and they're going to come together now, and they're going to do a live video chat. They're actually going to collaborate on the teaching. During the video session, the kids in both classrooms are snapping photographs and with their smartphones, and they're actually uploading them to the blogs, because all of Susan's kids blog, and they're putting the videos and saying, wow, this is really cool. You know, here in America we thought this, and the Iceland kids are saying this. So there's this tacit curriculum that's going on. Just before lunch, Susan's students actually take and upload those images because they put them in Flickr. They have a classroom Flickr account where they're storing all the photos. And while their kids are eating lunch, Susan actually looks for a moment of real engagement. What she does is she takes one of the pictures and she adds a relevant quote, and she adds it to a group she belongs to on Flickr, where there's this growing group of photos that have captions that other people can use, so like part of the participatory culture. Later in the day, Susan actually introduces a learning strategy that she discovered in one of her communities, and she sends a thank you card because she tries it, and it works out really well. She sends a thank you card to the educator who shared it, and said, thanks so much, you know, this is great. And then she tweets her principal and says, man, you would not believe. I tried this strategy that I got off this online community, worked great. It's from a teacher in Norway. Come by and take a look and let me show you how it's planning out. After school, Susan actually revisits the online community. She then talks about, this is what I did. I took the idea you had, I remixed it a little bit, and this is what the outcome was. She cross-posts that on another group that she's a part of that focuses on pedagogy, and within minutes, educators around the world are kind of replying and sharing. Before she goes to bed at night, she actually checks the education policy Facebook group, and she adds her thoughts. Remember the article that was going around? And she links the post about the learning strategy and the Iceland video photos so that everybody can see them. So what do you think? Is this what Susan does in a typical day? Is that over the top? Is that realistic? Is it unrealistic? And we'll just close for a minute or two with those kinds of comments, and then I'll turn it back over to Barbara to close us out for the day. So is Susan a connected educator? Is it realistic? Or come on, Susan doesn't have a life. What do you think? Somebody grab the mic or put those ideas in chat. Who'd like to put the talk button? Peggy, you want to weigh in real quick? or Jenny or any of you that have a mic, just click on the talk button. I know some of you are actually putting things in the chat. Anybody, some of you are saying Susan's awesome. Anybody feel like maybe this is over the top?
There are 3 mics. I have one and you have one, so.
Yeah, I keep cutting mine off in case somebody wants to grab it.
And I definitely do not feel like it's over the top.
Tell me why, Barbara.
Can't talk on the mic.
Yeah, that's Peggy that can't. So Barbara, tell me why you don't think it's over the top. Tell me why you think what Susan's doing is right on.
I don't think it's over the top because it's actually occurred. I've watched it occur in my classroom. I've watched it occur in other teachers' classrooms. Not maybe to that extent because now they're bringing in, I am retired as well, but they're bringing in a lot of different medias using when they tweet. And different ways to connect. But I've watched it go on with a school in Japan, personally, and I think it is really the wave of the future, and it's probably the best move that education can make.
So Sherry said she agrees it's what we should be doing, but she really is not sure that how to get started. Sherry, if you go to that link that I put in there, that's where I have the resources today. In the resource list towards the bottom, there's a Newbies Get Connected guide, and it's 31 days of connected goodness. And so what it'll do is it'll take you step by step. Each day there's one small thing to try. And by the end of it, it really is a comprehensive look, not just at tools, but also at concepts. And so it'll really help you understand what it means to be a connected educator and the kinds of skill sets that you need to have. So it breaks it down into baby steps, and I hope that that'll be helpful for you. It's also a Twitter, how to get started in Twitter there too. So Barbara, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you very much for having me today, and I enjoyed being with everyone.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to ask you to do one more thing that you referenced earlier, if you don't mind. But I want to remind everybody of the book discounts, and Sheryl actually put in the code over there, and I added it as well, that this recording will be available as soon as everyone exits the room, probably in about 30 minutes, but definitely by tomorrow, that the recording will be there for a year until this time in 2014. You can get your CPE for watching a recorded session by going to resources. At a later time, but the CPE for this particular class and for all live sessions will generate automatically, as will the badges, and the badges are aligned to the star chart. And Sheryl, you mentioned, and I don't know how to do this, how to save the chat, and I think everybody in here would really like to be able to do that. So if you could possibly show that, I certainly would appreciate it. I think everyone else would.
All right.
And I personally would thank you too.
Okay, great. Thanks. It's really easy to save the chat. All you have to do is go up to the top in the far left-hand corner, and where it says File, you simply go File, Save, Chat. Now, when you click on Chat, you'll need to decide where it's going to go. And then often it'll save it as a text file. So you don't want to just save it and save it somewhere where you won't remember. So I'm usually pretty intentional, and a lot of times I'll save the chat on the main at first so I can find it. But when you go to look for it, it's usually saved as a text file.
Awesome. And thank you again. It was a fabulous presentation. Absolutely fabulous. I'm going to stop the recording.